Well, I became interested in secondary migration in part because I grew up in a very rural part of Canada, and one of the things that I noticed, you know, I would go away off to university and then I'd come back, and one of the things I noticed was that the visible minority composition of my small town was beginning to change, and I knew that it was not probably from people who were coming immediately from abroad, but instead it was due to secondary migration. So it's just sort of started off as a bit of a small project that ended up becoming something much larger. Well, I worked at Statistics Canada for 3 years, and I was aware of a lot of the data files that existed there that researchers typically hadn't had a lot of access to. So one of the things I did when I started to become interested in secondary migration was inquire about the availability of these files and try to determine whether or not this was something that I'd be able to use for my own research purposes. I used immigrant landing records linked to their tax filer information. So these data have existed for a long time, but initially they were only used by government analysts for programmatic purposes, and it's only relatively recently that it's become more useful for research purposes. Well, I didn't have any huge expectations. I mean, anecdotally, you could tell that just by walking around in various Canadian rural and urban regions, you could tell that secondary migration was populating not only our largest cities, but also some of its more secondary and tertiary cities. So that was one of the things that I found right away, and I expected to see in the data, and sure enough, I did find that. So I was kind of happy to see that. It allowed me to trust my own methodology to some extent. One of the things that really surprised me was that quite a few immigrants do not actually go to the destination that they think they're going to. And for smaller jurisdictions, this actually has quite an effect. So just take the example of Prince Edward Island. A lot of people say they're going to Prince Edward Island when they land in Canada, but in actuality, only about 70% of all people that say they're going to Prince Edward Island actually go there. So in terms of providing settlement services and understanding whether settlement services can be linked into recruitment and retention initiatives, I think it makes more sense to look at people that actually step foot in Prince Edward Island. Well, one of the things that really jumped out for me was the fact that a lot of provinces, nearly all provinces in Canada, are getting better and better at recruitment and retention. So the retention rates across Canada are actually going up. So people are moving around a lot less than they used to. And I think that can probably be attributed to some of the programs that are coming out, like the provincial nominee program, transitioning temporary foreign workers and international students to permanent status. All of these mechanisms provide built-in anchors, I think, so that you see increases in retention rates across Canada. So, and by retention, I mean people are not only more likely to stay in the province in which they initially start their lives in Canada, but they'll actually also often stay in the jurisdiction, whether that be a municipality, a county, or a city. And I think that's really important because what it does suggest is that lower levels of geography now have more and more control about the types of people that they're able to recruit to the regions. Well, I think there are several important implications. One of them is that it makes sense to continue to devolve immigration policies to subnational geographical levels or subnational governments. The federal government does a great job in many ways of selecting the types of immigrants that we want to have in the Canadian economy overall, but I think it makes sense to also provide initiatives like the Atlantic Immigration Pilot make an increasing amount of sense, and it might be something that we want to use in other parts of Canada as well. Well, one of the things that I think is noteworthy is that what I think my research and research like this has begun to do is sort of impress upon people the importance of studying recruitment and retention as an initiative, particularly when we have sub-replacement levels of fertility across Canada. Immigration is almost exclusively the source of population growth across most of the country, so it really makes sense to understand more about the processes whereby people move around.